The perishable. Sigmund Freud. The perishable. Some time ago I was walking through a flowery summer countryside, in the company of a taciturn friend and a young but already famous poet who admired the beauty of the surrounding nature, but could not take pleasure in it, because he was worried by the idea that everything that splendor was doomed to perish, that already in the coming winter it would have disappeared, like all human beauty and like everything beautiful and noble that man has created and could create. All that he would have loved and admired, had it not been for this circumstance, seemed to him devoid of value due to the fate of perishing to which he was condemned. We know that this concern for the perishable nature of what is beautiful and perfect can give rise to two different psychic tendencies. One leads to the bitter world weariness felt by the young poet, the other, to rebellion against that alleged fatality. No. It is impossible that all that splendor of nature and art, of our sentimental world and of the outside world, is really doomed to disappear into nothingness. To believe it would be too foolish and sacrilegious. All of this must be able to subsist in some way, removed from whatever influence threatens to annihilate it. But this claim to eternity too clearly betrays its affiliation to our desires for it to be able to claim the value of reality. Also, what is painful can be true. For this reason I could not bring myself to refute the generality of the perishable nor to impose an exception for the beautiful and the perfect. On the other hand, I denied to the pessimistic poet that the perishable nature of the beautiful involved its devaluation. On the contrary, it is an increase in its value. The perishable quality carries a rarity value over time. The limited possibilities of enjoying it make it all the more precious. I expressed, then, my incomprehension that the expiration of beauty would cloud the enjoyment that it provides us. As for the beauty of nature, it is reborn after each winter destruction, and this rebirth can well be considered eternal in comparison with the term of our own life. In the course of our existence we see the beauty of the human face and body exhausted forever, but this transience adds a new charm to its charms. A flower does not seem less splendid to us because its petals are only blooming for one night. Nor was I able to understand why the limitation in time should undermine the perfection and beauty of the artistic work or intellectual production. There will come a time when the paintings and statues we admire today will be reduced to dust. A generation of beings will succeed us who no longer understand the works of our poets and thinkers. Even a geological era occurs that sees all life on earth silenced. It doesn't matter, the value of what is beautiful and perfect only resides in its importance for our perception. It is not necessary that it survive it and, consequently, it is independent of its duration in time. Although these arguments seemed unobjectionable to me, I could see that they did not make a dent in the poet or in my friend. Such a failure led me to presume that they must have been seized by a powerful affective factor that clouded the clarity of their judgment, a factor that I later believed I had found. Undoubtedly, the psychic rebellion against affliction, against mourning for something lost, must have spoiled their enjoyment of beauty. The idea that all this beauty would be perishable produced in both, so sensitive, an anticipated sensation of the affliction that its annihilation would cause them, and since the soul instinctively turns away from everything painful, these people felt their enjoyment of it inhibited. The beautiful by the idea of its perishable nature. Mourning for the loss of something loved or admired seems so natural to the layman, that he does not hesitate to describe it as obvious and evident. For the psychologist, on the other hand, this affliction represents a great problem, one of those phenomena that, although unknown in themselves, serve to reduce other uncertainties to them. Thus, we imagine possessing a certain amount of amorous capacity called libido that at the beginning of evolution was oriented towards the ego itself, to later, although in reality very early, be directed towards objects, which in such a way remain in a certain way included in ourself. If the objects are destroyed or if we lose them, our loving capacity, libido, is released again, and can take other objects as substitutes, or else temporarily return to the self. However, we cannot explain to ourselves nor can we yet deduce any hypothesis about it why this detachment of the libido from its objects must necessarily be such a painful process. We only verify that the libido clings to its objects and that even when new substitutes are available, it does not resign itself to parting with the objects it has lost. Here then is the duel. The conversation with the poet took place during the summer that preceded the war. A year later it broke out and robbed the world of all its beauties. Not only did he annihilate the beauty of the landscapes he traveled through and the works of art he brushed against on his way, but he also shattered our pride in the progress achieved in culture, our respect for so many thinkers and artists, the hopes we had placed in a definitive overcoming of the differences that separate peoples and races from each other. The war mudded our sublime scientific equanimity, exposed our instinctive life in crude nakedness, unleashed the evil spirits that dwell in us and that we supposed were definitively tamed by our most noble impulses, thanks to a multi-secular education. It once again closed the scope of our homeland and once again made the remaining world distant and vast. It took away from us so much of what we loved and showed us the expiration of much that we thought was stable. It is not surprising that our libido, so impoverished of objects, has come to occupy with all the greater intensity those that we have left. It is not curious that suddenly our love for the country has increased, the affection for our own and the pride that inspires us in what we possess in common. But did those other goods, now lost, really lose value in our eyes just because they proved to be so perishable and fragile? Many of us think so, but unfairly, as I think once again. It seems to me that those who think in such a way and seem to be willing to renounce once and for all what is appreciable, simply because it did not turn out to be stable, are only overwhelmed by the grief that their loss caused them. We know that mourning, however painful it may be, is consumed spontaneously. Once everything lost has been renounced, it will have exhausted itself and our libido will once again be free to replace the lost objects with new ones, possibly as or more valuable than those, as long as we are still young enough and keep our vitality. It is to be expected that the same will happen with the losses of this war. Once the mourning is over, it will be noted that our high esteem for cultural assets has not been diminished by the experience of their fragility. We will rebuild everything that the war has destroyed, perhaps on firmer ground and with greater permanence. End. The Perishable. Sigmund Freud.